The wait is over. Dive into Audible's most anticipated collection, The Best of 2025, featuring top audiobooks, podcasts, and originals across all genres. Our editors have carefully curated this year's must-listens, from brilliant hidden gems to the buzziest new releases. Every title in this collection has earned its spot. This is your go-to for the absolute best in 2025 audio entertainment. Whether you love thrillers, romance, or nonfiction, your next favorite listen awaits. Discover why there's more to imagine when you listen at audible.com/bestoftheyear.
April Andrews left her home to walk down to a church clothing giveaway, but never returned. She was assumed to be a runaway for years, but the sheriff's department took another look at the case and they now believe it's a criminal one. But they need to find April to move forward. I'm Charlie and welcome to Crimelines. Hello and welcome to day 3 of the 12 days of Crimelines, 12 days that are not exactly in a row, but they are spread out throughout the month, and that has been working for us so far. We're only on day 3, so we'll see how the rest of the days go. Today's episode takes us to Northwest Arkansas to talk about the case of a missing teenager, April Dawn Andrews. The lead advocate in this case was April's older sister, Tanya, but sadly, she passed away in 2022 at just 47 years old. Thankfully, she did a comprehensive interview with the Unfound podcast in 2020, so I have used that as a source. The podcast will, of course, be listed in my sources, and I do recommend listening to it because there really is no substitute for hearing it straight from Tanya herself. But let's go ahead and talk first about April. April Andrews was born in April of 1991 into a large family. It was a blended family. She had 5 full siblings with her mom and dad, and then her dad had 3 older children he brought into the marriage. They were quite a bit older than April. In fact, her sister Tanya had a child around April's age. When April was about 4 or so, her parents divorced, and her mother, Tina, did remarry, and then in 2002, April's father died. April was just 11. Not long after her father's death, Tina's second marriage ended, and she didn't have anywhere to go with the children. Tina didn't work, and her only income was the Social Security survivor benefits that she was getting for the kids because their father died. Plus, she got disability benefits for some of the children. At least 2 of April's siblings had special needs, as did April herself. Pretty much homeless with multiple children to support, Tina moved in with her stepdaughter, Tanya, who herself had 4 children by that point. It was cramped quarters and a stressful environment, to be sure. But Tanya said Tina was able to get back on her feet thanks to something that was actually unfortunate. Tanya told the Unfound podcast that April was riding her bike in the neighborhood when a neighbor hit her with a car. April did fully recover, but there was an insurance payout, and Tina used that money to move the family into an affordable apartment complex in a small town called Pea Ridge. When I say small town, I don't mean like 500, 600 people. Pea Ridge did have a population of about 2,300. I happen to like weird facts about towns, and I almost started a podcast once with that as part of the premise, so this has nothing to do with the case, but Pea Ridge was the site of a Civil War battle, and according to a 2021 AY magazine article, the city streets are named after soldiers. The east-west running streets are named for Confederate ones, and the north-south streets are named for Union soldiers. Again, nothing to do with this case, but it's interesting to me and probably 5 of you. Anyway, let's get back to April Andrews, who was living in Pea Ridge with her mom, and at that point, 3 of her siblings. Tina struggled financially, to put it mildly, to support 4 children. She didn't have a car or even a driver's license, and they couldn't afford a phone bill. Add in the kids' special needs and the general inaccessibility that comes with small town living with limited resources, and their world in Pea Ridge was pretty small. As I mentioned, April was among the siblings with special needs, and she was in special ed classes. According to what Tanya told the Unfound podcast, you wouldn't immediately know that April had these struggles with a surface-level, small talk kind of conversation, but if you went any past that, it would be pretty obvious. At 15, she functioned more on the level of a 10-year-old, and Tanya wasn't even entirely sure that April knew her home address. Being in special education in school meant that April was set apart from her peers, which made it difficult socially. And after she moved to Pea Ridge, she dealt with bullying at school. She was shy, so it took her a while to make friends in a new school, but she did have some, not a lot. And school for April mostly meant getting picked on by a group of girls who found anything to make fun of her for, her shyness, her special education classes, her looks, whatever they could find. Facing bullying at school made April hesitant to go, and her attendance record definitely reflected that. Tanya said that Tina didn't push the kids to go to school when they would resist, so it wasn't too hard for April to get out of going when she didn't think she could face it. But she was a sweet kid, and she really sounds like the type of kid who had the adults around her rooting for her, even if she could not find that same support with her peers. It was in part due to the stress at school and some at home that when April disappeared, people seemed to just assume she ran away. What exactly happened on the day 15-year-old April Andrews went missing, which was Saturday, November 18th, 2006, is a little confusing because we have some different stories. Tanya told the Unfound podcast that Tina told investigators that she and the kids walked down to the store in the morning and walked past a church that was advertising a used clothing giveaway. When they got home, April asked Tina if she could walk back down to the church to see if she could get some clothing. However, in a 2021 AY Magazine article, it was reported that April walked down to the Dollar General in the morning with an 8-year-old neighbor who we're going to call Jenny. This is the only place I have seen it reported that Jenny was included in any outing that morning. But the Dollar General is next door to the church April was headed to. The two were just separated by a narrow road. So I'm wondering if the walk with the family is being conflated with Jenny or vice versa. Something's going on there. According to the AY article, Jenny said they got back to the apartment complex by noon and went their separate ways. Sometime later, Jenny was outside playing when she saw April leave the complex again. Tanya puts this at about 2 p.m. from what she was told by investigators. Now, April never made it to the church that was a half a mile from their house. From what Tanya was told, the church didn't even have a giveaway that day, so it's not clear why Tina said they did or why maybe April thought they did. Maybe there was a miscommunication or a misunderstanding somewhere along the way. For anyone familiar with Pea Ridge, any witnesses who may have been around, the walk would have taken April south on Weston to Slack Street. So those are the main roads to think about when visualizing this case. Jenny said that she saw April walking away from the apartment complex heading south on Weston, but that April went up to a pickup truck that has been described as tan or brown, older, beat up, and single cab. April spoke to the driver, and then she walked around to the other side of the truck. April was pretty timid, and she was not someone who was comfortable talking with people she didn't know. And no one thinks she would have gotten into a truck with a stranger. But it's not clear if Jenny saw her get into the truck. A lot of the reporting says she did, but the Charlie Project makes it clear that that is not confirmed that she got in. In looking at Google Maps, from where Jenny was standing in the parking lot of the apartment complex, it seems to me like she wouldn't be able to see the passenger side of the truck. When the truck pulled away, it was traveling south on Weston Street towards Slack Street, which is where the church and the Dollar General were. This is the last confirmed sighting of April Andrews as far as we know from what has been released by the authorities. When April didn't come home that afternoon and Tina couldn't find her, she reported her missing that evening to the Pea Ridge police. Several hours had passed from when Tina last saw April until she reported her missing, but we do have to remember that 1, this was a 15-year-old, not a 7-year-old, and 2, the police said it was normal within their family dynamic for the kids to play freely. And reading between the lines and listening to Tanya sort of talk about the family dynamic on the Unfound podcast, I just get the impression that Tina's supervision of her children was just on the lax side. The responding officer in this case was Sergeant Cyrilla Doyle, and about a year after April's disappearance in December of 2007, she told the Associated Press that April was entered as an endangered missing person because people thought she had been abducted at first, but by a year out, she said, quote, "Everybody thinks she is a runaway." But for starters, saying everybody was overstating it. Tina, April's mom, did think it was possible she ran away. There was the bullying at school and not feeling like she fit in. Plus, April was old enough to see the stress on her mother, who was struggling financially. Tina said she thought maybe April ran away because she didn't want to be a burden. As a mom who would do almost anything for my kids, that makes me so sad to think that she thought her daughter ran off from her because she perceived herself as a burden. That would hurt me so deeply as a mother. But when I was sitting thinking about it for a little while, I had to wonder if Tina was hoping April had run away. If she ran away, she was probably alive. It was April's older sister, Tanya, who eventually became the family advocate in the case, who didn't believe April ran away, not for a second. She said April was too much of a mama's girl. She couldn't see her going off and living life without ever contacting Tina again. It didn't make any sense, and so she doubted that runaway theory as soon as she heard her sister was missing. Someone else, it sounds like, may have doubted this was a school resource officer who said he had a good conversation with April in the fall of 2006, not long before she disappeared. For those who don't have these in their school resource officers are fully trained police officers who are assigned to work within schools. They are specially trained for this since working with teens is quite different from pulling over speeding drivers or responding to 911 calls. A good SRO builds relationships with the students and the staff at the schools, in addition to providing security and crime prevention. When April talked to her school's SRO in 2006, she seemed to be in a good spot. She told him she was focusing on school and that she felt things were getting better.
Wherever you go, whatever they get into, from chill time to everyday adventures, protect your dog from parasites with Credelio Quattro. For full safety information, side effects, and warnings, visit CredeliaQuattroLabel.com. Consult your vet or call 1-888-545-5973. Ask your vet for Credelio Quattro and visit QuattroDog.com.
Though Sergeant Doyle told the Associated Press that early on it was assumed to be an abduction, it doesn't seem like that is entirely true, or that was a very, very short window of a theory, because not a lot was done to look for April Andrews. Certainly not what we would see if we assumed someone had been abducted. I didn't find any news reports about searches and the like. The first article I found was a year after she went missing, which isn't to say there wasn't anything published earlier. They've just not been digitized so that I can find them. But I will say, in my years and years of doing this, when I cannot find any early reporting on something, it means either one, there was very little to no coverage, or the coverage was only hyper-local and it didn't even make it out to the papers in the surrounding area. My assessment is backed up by a 2018 interview with KNWA. The Sheriff's Department said that the initial report was vague, and there didn't appear that a canvass of the neighborhoods was even done. So if that wasn't being done, a big media push likely wasn't either. According to Tanya on the Unfound podcast, the 8-year-old girl who saw April near the truck did talk to the police really early on. So they did have a description of this truck in the beginning, but didn't put it out there to generate public tips. The first article I found came out a year later, and there's another clue that may have been the first article about the case, because that is when the extended family first heard April was missing from that article. Tina never reached out and let anyone, including Tanya, know that April had left the home. Tanya saw the article about it and drove to Pea Ridge to see what was going on. With Tina not having a phone, showing up on her doorstep was really the best way to get in touch with her. Tanya told the Unfound podcast that she was surprised that even without a phone, that Tina didn't try to reach out. If April had run away, she didn't have friends she could have gone to, so she likely would have tried to make it to one of her older siblings' houses, and that would have been the first place Tina checked, but neither Tina nor the police checked there. I think it's weird that Tina didn't disclose April's disappearance to the family, because she did tell the police about it, and she told the Associated Press, when the case finally did get media attention, that she put up some flyers around town, but within 2 weeks, someone had taken them all down. She didn't have the money or the resources to do any more than that. April's case then made it into the news again about 3 weeks before the second anniversary of her disappearance, when the first lead investigator on the case, Cyrilla Doyle, went missing. I'm going to get into some detail here about what happened because it is too easy to think there is a connection, but once you hear the details, you'll see that there isn't one, and for the sake of both families, there's really no need to continue to connect the cases. Leading up to her own disappearance, Cyrilla had a very rough year. In February of 2008, her husband died from what sounds like diabetic ketoacidosis, and there were some family dynamics with extended family members that made her grief complicated. Within a few months of her husband's death, Cyrilla started dating someone new, and it was a terrible match. He had a number of legal issues in his past, and once the relationship was made public, the Pea Ridge Police Department told her she had 3 options: break things off with the guy, quit her job, or get fired. She opted, after 20 years in law enforcement, to retire early in August of 2008. Soon after, she moved with this boyfriend about an hour and a half away from Pea Ridge. It sounds like no one in Cyrilla's life approved of this relationship. They believed the boyfriend was abusive, and it is clear he was controlling by trying to keep her away from her family, which included her siblings, her mother, and even her adult children. On Sunday, October 26, 2008, Cyrilla and her boyfriend had an argument, and he drove her to Bentonville, near where her daughter lived. He dropped her off at the police department, claiming that Cyrilla threatened to kill herself if he didn't bring her back to his house. We don't know if that's true, but he did leave her at the police station, and Cyrilla was obviously upset about this. A police officer did take Cyrilla's gun from her, telling her they'd give it back when she was doing better, and they offered to take her to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. She did not want to go, so they called her adult daughter Danielle to come get her and take her back to her house. Of course, Danielle picked her up, and she saw her the next morning around 7:30 when Danielle, was getting ready to go to work. She said Cyrilla was already awake and ready to head out to run some errands, but when Danielle came home, Cyrilla was gone. Left behind were her vehicles, ID, cell phone, credit cards, a power of attorney she had printed out the night before, a check made out to Danielle, and a list of to-do items like water the plants and take out the garbage. Cyrilla also wrote a note asking Danielle not to hate/blame her boyfriend. Danielle called around, and when she couldn't find anyone who had heard from Cyrilla that day, she reported her mom missing. The investigators were able to build out what Cyrilla did after she left Danielle's house. They found on Danielle's computer a search for bus tickets to Tulsa, which they found that Cyrilla did buy, though they do not know if she got on the bus or not. They know that Cirilla went to the ATM to withdraw $1,000 in cash, and at 9:40 in the morning, she bought things like a gear bag, a hat, shoes, and a zip-up hoodie at Walmart. From there, the trail went cold. The boyfriend was taken to the station and questioned, but he didn't appear to have any involvement in her disappearance. Now, Cirilla's family was divided on what they thought happened, but it was clear she was under a lot of stress, and the evidence pointed to her likely leaving town on her own. The question was she staying away of her own free will? And answers didn't come in that case until 2018. Some people walking in a non-residential area in Mason City, Iowa, came across a partial skeleton in May of that year. There were some small personal effects as well as some clothing at the scene, and an anthropologist determined that the bones were of a white woman and they had been there for about 5 to 15 years. In October, nearly 10 years to the day after Cirilla Doyle was last seen, the bones were identified as hers. At the time, they said they were investigating, but there were no obvious signs of foul play, and the reporting dropped off sharply after this. And again, because I've been doing this for so long and I've seen these patterns, it is likely because it was believed to be a suicide. Cirilla was a strong woman who endured a lot in life up to that point, and her mother said she did not believe it was a suicide because she felt Cirilla would have continued to stand tall against all of the ups and downs. But I do want to acknowledge that she had lost a lot that year. Her husband, her career, and even the relationship with her family was strained because of that boyfriend. Grief can be very heavy. Cirilla Doyle's story is incredibly sad, and it very likely has nothing to do with the April Andrews disappearance. But the fact that the initial investigator on the case went missing would have some implications for the Benton County Sheriff's Office, who took over the case from P. Ridge in 2012. They were not able to talk to Cirilla about the early days of the investigation or get any information that wasn't already documented. And what was in the case file has been described as vague, so having Cirilla fill it out for them would have been very, very helpful. April's case at that point in 2012 was no longer being looked at as an endangered runaway case. They looked at the totality of the circumstances and found that it was unlikely April ran away. For one thing, she had nowhere to go. Her older siblings and extended family never heard from her, and she didn't have a circle of friends to hide out with or help her along the way. She didn't have the skills to make it on her own at just 15, particularly given her special needs, and she didn't have contact with some mystery person on the internet who lured her away. Her mom couldn't afford a phone line, so not only did April not have a cell phone, she didn't have any social media or unfettered internet access. As this was now in 2012 being treated as an abduction, Bentonville's Child Abduction Response Team and the Morgan Nick Foundation were involved in getting this case reinvestigated. One of the first things they always do when a case is reopened and after the case file has been thoroughly read through is they re-interview everyone, and then they find people who were overlooked and interview them. This was tricky after 6 years had passed. This was an apartment complex that had a rather transient population, so a lot of the people who lived there at the time had to be tracked down to their new residence to be talked to. Then, in April of 2013, an anonymous letter was sent suggesting they search a pond in Benton County. The investigators drained the pond and they searched through all the muck and mud at the bottom, but didn't find anything. They were able to track down the letter writer, and it turned out to be someone who knew a person who lived in the same apartment complex as April Andrews, and the letter writer had some suspicions about that person, but it doesn't sound like they had direct knowledge. The sheriff's department also checked Benton County vehicle registrations and learned that there was someone in the apartment complex that owned an older brown truck like the one Jenny saw April near and may be getting into. They have not released more information to the public about where this did or did not lead. In Tanya's interview with Unfound, she mentioned that there was another tan truck in the mix. Tanya was told from a friend of April's that there was a group of girls who were not exactly befriending April, but more trying to get her to do things she shouldn't do, like sneak out. It sounds from Tanya's phrasing like they were more toying with her than including her in things. The girl who was, as Tanya phrases it, the ringleader, had a tan truck in her family. Tanya also voiced some suspicion about the men Tina had in her life, particularly one who had lived across the street from the family, but the police have said the man moved out of the area before the disappearance. And there are those who wonder if Tina knew more than she said. There were elements of her early story to the police that weren't true, like that she had seen Tanya on the day April disappeared, which Tanya said never happened. Tina also didn't tell the extended family about April's disappearance, which stopped them from jumping in to help search or push for more answers. I don't personally think Tina knew more than she was saying or knew what happened to her daughter, but I do see why others hold some questions. Based on a 2020 interview with Fox 16, it seems pretty obvious the police have their theory of what happened. The sheriff's office straight out said that they have suspects identified, and they were still following up on active tips and leads, but their hope was that they would find April to have the evidence they needed to then move forward with any charges. And that's really what everyone wants to happen. Sadly, in 2022, both April's sister Tanya and her mother Tina died. 2 other siblings of April's have passed away, and it really is time to bring answers to those who are still waiting. At the time April went missing, she was 15 years old, 5'4" and 100 pounds. She was wearing a black halter top with a brown sweater and light brown corduroy pants. She has blue eyes and strawberry blonde hair. If you know anything, you can call the Benton County Sheriff's Criminal Investigations Division at 479-271-1009 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST.